Two Parkies In A Pod is powered by Parkinson's UK, the charity that's here to support every Parkinson's journey every step of the way. Wherever you're from, whatever you need, visit parkinsons.org.uk for more information.
Aloha, welcome to Two Parkies In A Pod. I'm Dave, he's Kuhan. Together we've had the dreaded lurgy for 26 years. Ridiculous, Kuhan. How are you?
I'm fine. Is it aloha or is it buongiorno? Come stai?
You speak fluent Italian, do you?
No, I don't, but you do.
No, tutto bene.
Tell the listeners what you've been doing.
Been having some Italian lessons, yeah.
How's it going?
Rubbish.
Rubbish?
Yeah, I should have done conversational Italian. I've done like a beginner's course, so you've got to learn all the tenses and all that sort of stuff. I find it a bit difficult.
It's a bit hardcore.
Yeah, so...
You just want to know how to order a beer, basically.
A beer and a pizza, yeah, but...
Right.
We're getting on all right.
Yeah.
6 weeks in, we're doing okay.
Good brain exercise, right?
Yeah, exactly. It helps neuroplasticity, doesn't it?
Yes, learning a new skill, like a new language.
Yeah.
Got to be good for you.
Exactly.
Well done. It's a bit like an Italian summer here, Dave. It's very warm, isn't it?
Very well. How do you cope with the heat? Is it bad for you?
Very bad. I don't cope very well. I really suffer in the heat. The fatigue is a lot worse. Symptoms are a lot worse. But I'm making an effort this year. I'm wearing loose clothing. So I've got my T-shirt and my shorts on as we speak.
Right.
Drinking lots of water.
And coffee.
And coffee, which probably doesn't help.
And those expensive shakes from our local cafe, yeah?
Yes, overpriced smoothies. But anything to cool me down, including a portable fan I got from Amazon, which is great because I can put it in my pocket and take it on the train. And
we were on the train the other day and he rips out this plastic thing. What the hell is this? And he flicks it up. It's like something from the bat utility belt.
Yes.
Pulls it up and the fan comes out.
Yeah, one of those USB fans. It doubles up as a battery pack as well. Very handy, very portable and highly effective. We've also invested at the other end of the scale into a very large Dyson fan. You know, one of those ones that you can practically fit through it.
Better get you Dyson fans, about 500 quid, aren't they?
It's not cheap, but it's very, very effective. It's almost like air conditioning. I really suffer. You're not too bad in the heat, right?
No, I really suffer when it's they call it close, don't they? When it's about to rain and stuff, and the pressure's on, and it seems to affect me, you know. It
does. We were playing tennis a couple of times this week, and it was very muggy, very close, and we both were really suffering. Also went out for Helen's birthday the other day, which was a bit of a day out for us.
Well, I went out for a drink with you. I said, "What have you got, Helen, for a birthday?" He said, "Nothing." Nothing yet.
I'm not very good at birthdays.
Absolutely rubbish. You know, all the good she does for you, and you didn't even been to the shops and you didn't know what you were going to do with your birthday.
I rushed off to the local
Oliver
Bonas store and got a nice water jug, which she's been after for a while, and it went down very well. She was very surprised more than anything that I managed to get her something.
Has she always wanted a water jug for a birthday?
Well, she's always wanted something, and I'm not very good at presents and big days, so she was very happy, and we went out to watch Mission Impossible in the cinema, right. Which 3 hours in a cinema is quite tough, actually. It was quite uncomfortable.
You go through the full cycle, don't you?
Yeah, went through a full cycle, yeah, exactly. Meds halfway through. Just sitting down for that long, I was just a little bit uncomfortable. Fortunately, there was only 6 people in the cinema, so I could...
Plenty of room,
I could stretch out. And we went for dinner and some wine after as well. So it was a full day. And I really felt it. You know, it was very rare that I can do so many things in one day. And when I got home, I went into really bad off. And even the next day, I was suffering. But hopefully for not too much longer.
Yeah, Mission Impossible to Mission Impossible, because you're having DBS.
Hopefully it will be Mission Impossible. My DBS, which Deep Brain Stimulation, the surgical procedure, which we've mentioned on this podcast before, is coming up in a matter of, a few days as we record this. In fact, this episode is likely to go out after my procedure. So hopefully I'll be fit and well and recovering while everyone's listening to this episode.
Well, I've got a special guest for you, Kuhan, because
who's that?
I've sorted out the brain surgeon who's part of the team who's going to be working on you to come round for a cup of tea. He's coming around a couple of minutes. So he's called Harith Akram. He's a consultant neurosurgeon at the National Hospital of Neurology and Neurosurgery at Queen's Square, London, where you're getting your operation. He's even invented the tool, apparently, that's going to make a hole in your head. So we'll find out a bit more about him.
Fascinating character by the sounds of it. Let's hear from him now.
Harith Akram, welcome to Two Parkies In A Pod.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Welcome, Harith. This is a little strange for me, and it's got to be a first, right? In that you're going to be the surgeon or part of the surgical team that does my DBS procedure in a matter of days from now, actually. So I thought before you get into my head, we'll take an opportunity to get a little bit into your head and find out what makes you tick. If you don't mind, can we start with your upbringing? Because I understand you're originally from Iraq, and you had quite the childhood.
Yes, yeah. You could say my upbringing was a little bit unorthodox. Actually coming into this world. I mean, if you want to start from the beginning, I was a severely premature newborn. I kind of very, very premature, and it's 1,200 grams when I arrived to this world.
That's less than the weight of a human head, as we learned yesterday, Dave.
Yes, that's true.
1,400 milligrams.
And I had to, in kind of normal circumstances, you stay in a special unit, pediatric ICU or neonatal ICU until you develop. My lungs weren't developed, my skin wasn't developed. But as it happened, 4 days after I was born, war broke out between Iraq and Iran.
So this is early 80s.
This is, 1980. Right. So September 1980. And I was then discharged from hospital. The doctors told my mum to take me home and put me in a room and put the kettle on, basically, and just create hot water. An incubator environment.
Right.
And they said if he survives, he survives. But if he stays in the hospital, it's too dangerous. And so my mum used to keep me in a very, very warm room until there's an air raid or something, and I was going to pick me up and go and hide under the stairs. I don't know why under the stairs, because I'm not sure it's a very safe place, but who knows? But she managed to keep me alive, and then I was the war lasted for 8 years. And then after 8 years, we had a break for a couple of years, and another war started. And then my father got involved with politics on the other side, and
the other side being
the opposition.
Right.
So he was in exile. We ended up
opposition to Saddam. Right.
To Saddam. So he was all undercover until they were abroad, and then his cover was blown. I was arrested, which as a kind of by proxy.
How were we then?
I was I was 16, 17, I think, at the time, the first time, and then I was 21. And after that, I had to make my way out. Really, that was it. Managed to get
out. How did that work? I mean, like, you're on the run, or?
I'm still on the run, actually.
Right.
No, Saddam is not there
anymore.
Make
sure we don't broadcast to Iraq.
Don't tell them my address. No, I managed to get some fake papers and got in a taxi from Baghdad to Amman. So it's an 18-hour drive.
Jordan?
Yeah, to Jordan.
Wow.
And that was, in fact, before that, I spoke to my dad on the phone, and I said to him, my anatomy teacher is really bothering me these days, this anatomy teacher. And he said, which was code. And he said, well, why don't you go on a trip over the mountains to Kurdistan? And I said,
to be honest, that's not a very difficult code to
no,
break.
I know. Well, he said, why don't you go on holiday to Kurdistan? And I kind of thought, he means go over the mountains and get a smuggler to take me to Turkey. And then I didn't really fancy that. So I just
the other way.
Decided to just get in a cab, and I thought I can just go through immigration. They won't realize it. So I get in this taxi and I get to immigrations and I the officer checks my passport and then he says, so tell me, where do you work? And I said, I work for the Ministry of Education. And he said, do you? And who's your line manager? And I say, so-and-so is my line manager. And he says, I'm going to go inside and check. So he goes inside, comes out 5 minutes later. And I thought, that's it, because he obviously knows I'm, this is making this up.
Yeah.
And And if I get caught, then it will be capital punishment. There is no, at that time, there's nothing else to.
Is this 93, 94?
This was 2000. So Saddam was still
in between the Second and Third War. Then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who's counting anyway?
Counting,
There's so many wars.
Yeah.
So he comes out, he looks at me and he says, just gives me my passport and says, go. That's it. So I owe him my life, this officer. And then I go outside. I've like shaking, sweating, all of that. And I look for my cabbie and he's being arrested because he was smuggling cigarettes across the border. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Double sigh of relief then, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we then managed to get to Amman. We had to bribe them.
With cigarettes?
With cigarettes. And,
so they did come in handy then.
They did come in handy, yeah, exactly. That's how from my journey out of Iraq. And then a year later, I was in London. I had an aunt who lived in London. She sort of took me under her wings, and then I started my training soon after. Really trained in general surgery and then neurosurgery, and I found really my way into neurosurgery and functional neurosurgery because it fulfilled everything that I was really interested in from an early age. When I was a child, I was obsessed with circuit boards, and I would go to junkyards and just buy circuit boards. Some of them came from missiles and rockets. These are the best ones. So you go and see like a unexploded rocket system or whatever, and then I buy all the circuit boards. I go home and I take out all of the components one by one, which I forget about Lego. This takes days, weeks, and then I sort everything out because I had, I could read all the resistors and capacitors and transistors, and then I rebuilt them again into circuits, and I ended up doing basically operating on brain circuits now, mapping out brain circuits.
So do you consider yourself to be an engineer of the brain then?
Well, I mean, I do. My lab has a lot of engineers and
right.
Computer scientists and computer engineers, and the code that I developed and now we develop in my lab. It's all it's all engineering.
Amazing.
You built a supercomputer as well, didn't you?
Yes, I built a super for my PhD because I was just so impatient, and I thought if I wanted to finish my PhD in time and use the physics CPU cluster, which is a supercomputer that we had at UCL, it will take me 2 weeks for each patient to process the entire kind of brain connectome. And I went to my boss, my PhD supervisor at the time, Ludwig Zrinzo, he's really the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing.
The King of Malta, isn't he?
Yes, yeah, King of Malta. So I asked him, I said, I have this idea. I don't know if it's going to work. And if you can give me £15,000 to buy all these components, I'm going to put them together, and then I can build this supercomputer, which, if it works, it will cut down processing time from 2 weeks to a couple of hours. And he just said, hey, yeah, sure, go for it. So I kind of made the plans, and then I went to the UCL computer department, purchase all the components, and I said, can you buy me this? And I had, everyone thought I was nuts, but I put it all together, and a year later, they copied my design. They built 4 of them at UCL.
Small world story here. I studied at UCL Computer Science Department, actually. Did my undergraduate degree there. And my father was, back in the day, he was an electronic engineer, and he installed the first supercomputers in the universities in the UK. So,
oh, wow. So it's just
we're destined
world.
for each other.
He escaped from Sri Lanka as well, didn't he?
There was a lot of conflict at the time in Sri Lanka, and the UK was, maybe this is the same for you, it was considered to be not the motherland, but obviously being part of the subcontinent, and also the education system here was so strong. It was common path for people like my father, and I guess people of your generation coming from that region as well. It sounds like was it a deliberate choice, the UK?
It's exactly the same thing. So we Iraq used to be a British mandate when it was part of the Ottoman Empire for a very long time, 500 years, and then became, couldn't just join the League of Nations because it didn't have all the constituents of being an independent country. So it became under the British mandate, which meant that a lot of the institutions were established and founded by Britain.
Yeah.
So including the medical school.
Yeah.
And that meant that the syllabus was, would come from, be centralized from UK. And all of our postgraduate training. So initially all the professors were British, and then all the postgrad training would be in the UK. You finish training in Iraq, and then you go to the UK to do all your training, specialist training, and then you go back, which meant we had that tradition. And the exams were intercollegiate. You have the same exams, and which is why for me it was a natural progression. I always wanted to come to Britain to train, and I also, I have family, I have history in Britain. You probably don't know this, but my grandmother had young onset Parkinson's disease, and she had surgery in Queen Square where you're having surgery. I don't know exactly. I think
predecessors.
I think it was a surgeon called Guillaume who used to travel and do these operations. But it was 1972, and
she had what kind of surgery?
So I suspect she had a thalamotomy at that time. Before this is before CT and MRI.
Right.
So no imaging, and it didn't work.
Right.
but it was my dad was 12 years old. I think 1974, because my dad was 12 years old, and he was there with her.
We do ask every guest on this podcast what their connection is with Parkinson's, if they have one.
Well, there you go. We've already done that. You just have to cut and paste it.
I was going to say that's the best one yet, isn't it, Dave? Yeah, that's really quite remarkable.
Yeah. There's an auntie who influenced you as well, wasn't there, with the pain?
Yeah. So my
is that the same auntie you referred to?
Yeah. No. So this is a different aunt who was a physics teacher, and she she was a towering figure in my life. Very strong woman, because coming from Iraq, you'd expect that it's a man's world, but in our family, she was a matriarch, and she was the only one who my dad would listen to. So, and I, she taught me physics, which is one of my favorite subjects, and then she had breast cancer, and that was after I had left. So I wasn't in the country; was still in Iraq, and very quickly it spread to her bones and was just causing immense pain. And she would call me and just say, is there anything you can do to help? Is there anything we can do in Britain to help? And there was absolutely nothing I could do to help. It was just, it was horrendous. And the fact that was a way, I don't know if it made it better or worse, because I could at least pretend that I can't see what's happening, and I knew that she was suffering, and I had to. I think that kind of really spurred me on. Most doctors don't want to know about pain. I think most neurosurgeons don't want to deal with pain because it's such a difficult subject to deal with. But I again found my way being attracted to the field and try to develop techniques to get rid of pain. Everything is in the brain, right? All our experiences, the way we perceive the world is all happening in that small squidgy toothpaste. So there must be a way of switching off that pain. That's what I was thinking. We just need to find the right combination of switches, because it's not that straightforward. Unlike the motor system, which is quite basic, we can treat. But when it comes to pain and it comes to mental disorders, there are lots of different systems at play, and it's just finding the right switches.
And you found it.
I'm getting there. We're getting very close. So we've been developing a new old operation, which was done for cancer pain. But now we actually managed to map out the network rather than just make a lesion somewhere and hope, cross your fingers and hope it works. But we managed to map out that network, and then we had to use AI to do some of the modeling, which we could do before. And then we now can reverse engineer the network to tell the surgeon where to make the disconnection in the brain, which
quite amazing.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
We've come a long way from lobotomies, haven't we?
Yes, yeah. We have come a long way from lobotomies, thank God.
Can I go back to your medical school? Can you tell the listeners what age you attended medical school?
Oh, God, yeah. So I was 16 when I...
16.
I was a very annoying kid, you could say. So when I was in primary school, I think, I can't remember the first couple of years of primary school, just playing and doing stuff. But as I was kind of getting older and I got to year 5, I just basically stopped listening to the teachers, and was at some stage, I was so distracted at school, I was jumping up and down on my desk saying, I know the answer. But I was, on my desk jumping. So my teacher just said, I can't have this anymore, So I get called into the headmistress's office with my parents. And I think in this day and age, I'd get labeled as ADHD and then get given drugs to calm me down. But I'm so grateful to that headmistress, because she basically said to my parents, look, he's just not being stimulated enough at class. He's not challenged enough. I think he should sit the exit exam, because we had exit exams for year 6, and get to secondary school this year. And I said, I don't want to do that. I want to leave my friends. I'm having a great time. Mind you, because my mum was a secondary school teacher, so I would read her books, not the teaching books, and because I thought it was really fun to then give the answers from the secondary school syllabus. Yeah, so I said I want to do that, and my dad said, well, doesn't matter, because I don't think you can pull it off anyway.
There's a challenge.
And I said to him the equivalent of hold my pint. I said, I'm going to do it without even studying the 6th grade syllabus, and I managed. So then I went to secondary school, and that was a bit of a shock, because skipping a year at that stage means it's very obvious physically.
You're a lot smaller.
Yeah, I'm much smaller, prepubescent kid, and you go to secondary school and all those kids starting to have facial hair and they kind of try to speak like this, and I had a squeaky like little boy's voice, so they naturally made fun of my voice, and that was my nickname. And but I thought my response would be to just show them off, what I can do academically. And sports-wise, I had to stick to chess and table tennis, but I was good at those. And I progressed. I then actually managed to become taller than everybody. It's just endocrinology. I think nothing to do with me. And I did it again. Got to 15, and I thought, I'm going to set the baccalaureate this year, because why not?
Just explain that, what that is.
So that's the equivalent of A levels, and it's the Iraqi system. And you have to go through some IQ tests to be allowed to do it. And so I did all of that, and then I sat the baccalaureate at 15, and then got into medical school at 16, which was good, except that I couldn't have a girlfriend. my age. they're all much older than me, and I couldn't really drink until I was in year 3, which.
We're grateful for your sacrifices. At least I am. That's quite a remarkable story. It's going to sound a bit weird, but the only other person that I know that's originally from Iraq is my barber. And the reason why I mentioned that was somebody told me that the original brain surgeons were actually barbers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I guess that's obvious when you think about it, but
Yeah.
what is the history of brain surgery? If you could just condense into 1 or 2 minutes for us.
20 seconds. Well, on the barbers,
Yeah.
you see outside barbershops, sometimes they have a white and red
Yeah,
spirally
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I've always wondered
So-
what that signifies.
Bandages.
Oh,
Yeah, so that means that this barber does surgery.
fascinating.
So you have, the red bandage is obviously soaked in blood. The history of surgery is, in this country, is fascinating because physicians used to be, so the medics used to be the doctors, and what they do is they prescribe an operation, and you go to a barber surgeon who does the cutting for you, because it was considered kind of destructive, ugly act. This is all pre-anesthesia, so if you want to get an amputation, you go there and get pinned down and if you're lucky, get some opium and a bottle of brandy before you have your amputation done. But then the barber surgeons thought, hang on a second, we're doing all the work here, and you get all the glory. Well, we want to be admitted to the Royal College of Physicians. We want to be physicians too. Oh, and there were anatomy schools. So for you to become a surgeon, you have to go to an anatomy school. So you study anatomy and you train under another surgeon. It's a craft. And to be fair, that's still what we do now, right? It's a craft, even though, there have been so many attempts to change the system and make it more communal and equitable, let's say, in terms of training. At the end of the day, you need to find, if you want to be a good surgeon, you need to find a good mentor who's going to teach you the craft. Not one, but several mentors to teach you the craft. So so barber surgeons then revolted. There was a famous barber surgeon revolt, and the physician said, "Okay, right. Well, if you sit the exam, then we can admit you to the college." So so a lot of barber surgeons then decided to sit the exam and were admitted to the college, and but then they said, "But we don't want to be called doctors. We still want to be known as misters."
Right.
And
which is why we are still called misters.
You're a mister, right?
I know.
You're not even a doctor or professor.
Exactly. It's so bizarre.
And how many years does it take you to qualify as a brain surgeon?
I know. I remember the first time when I did so you get that title. So you qualify and you're a doctor, and then you get your MRCS, which is the first membership exam, a few years later, and then you're a mister. And I remember and you're still very, very junior. So I'm on the ward, and one of the nurses says, "Dr. Akram," and I look at her and I say, "It's Mr. Akram."
Sort of the other way around, right?
Which was ridiculous now in hindsight. But
If you don't mind me asking, how old are you, Harry?
Oh, now I'm 44.
Right.
Yeah.
I said to my partner, Helen, I'm pretty sure he's younger than me. I was like, I'm not sure how that makes me feel for some reason. And she said the same thing. I'm not sure what the ideal age is, but I asked you, Dave, in the pub the other night, what is the ideal age? You said?
I think there's a mixture thing. They want to be old enough so they've got enough experience behind them. Not too old that they're shaky. 44 is perfect age for a brain surgery. Perfect age. You've done your hours. You need 10,000 hours of prep and all that. And you're ready to go in there. It's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Shall we move on to deep brain stimulation?
Yeah. Just explain what DBS is.
Yeah. So deep brain stimulation is an operation that we do where we implant a wire in the brain. it can go to different targets in the brain, but it's a very thin wire, and it goes in using usually what we say MRI guidance. So we use a magnetic resonance imaging machine to show us exactly where we want to go in the brain, and then we use a frame that fits on the head called a stereotactic frame.
So the way I describe that to people is, if you've seen the movie Hannibal, that's kind of like what
You
it's
lock
like.
them in, don't you?
You're kind of screwed into this metal frame. It's quite heavy, or
it's not actually. It's not that heavy, but it's the reason why we need to use a frame is because we need to have a 3-dimensional Cartesian system to map out that space with submillimetric accuracy, so that we can place the electrode within the target. Because we're all different. We all have the same template. We all have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and you can recognize us as human. But all right, we have big heads, small heads, long heads, broad heads, and the brain.
He was looking at you when he said that.
Big heads, yeah.
Big heads, and the brain is the same. So even though the targets in the brain is the same target for every patient, the dimensions are different. So what we need to do is we need to use a fixed space that we know very well the dimensions of, which is the frame space. So we place that frame on the head, and then we get an MRI scan, and that way we can merge the MRI space with the frame space, and we use that to measure. So then I go on the MRI using a special platform, the navigation system, and I place my target point in the target area, which could be the subthalamic nucleus, the globus pallidus, and I calculate based on the frame space, a 3-dimensional space, an X, Y, and Z coordinate. So then in the frame itself, there's a vernier scale. I can put X, Y, and Z, which means when I put the lead in, the wire, the tip will end up exactly in that point.
Sounds like you're dropping a pin in Google Maps or something.
Yes.
Or maybe more accurately, Google Earth.
Yeah.
This imaging technology, MRIs and functional MRIs, really revolutionized your world, right?
Yeah,
Because
completely.
before that, you were
Going in blind.
We're
really,
going
weren't you?
blind. Yeah. Completely revolutionized. I mean, the field, neurosurgery in general has evolved with the evolution of imaging, but especially MRI. My PhD was on advanced MR imaging, so we pushed that field further, and we started to use not just the structural scans that we get from MRI, but we managed to map out the connections in the brain, and that way we can actually we can pinpoint that circuit in the brain.
Do you have robots that do this then? You surely don't do that by hand, do you?
We have a robot, but you'd be surprised, actually. It's much quicker to do this operation and much more comfortable to still do it manually than to use a robot.
So when you're in, I'm going to keep bringing this back to myself, if I may, just by way of example. So when I go into the OR,
What's OR?
the operating room, operating theatre?
Operating room, yeah.
Right, yeah.
How much of it is sort of manually done and how much of it is automated anyway in terms of use of robots or any other technology?
So the surgery itself is completely manually done.
Right.
Yeah, and that takes the cutting part itself. So the skin to skin, as we say in theatres, usually takes me about an hour if I'm doing it on my own.
Right.
And if I'm doing it with one of the residents, an hour and a half, usually.
Wow.
So it depends on the resident.
Can I just ask what will happen? Will he get? You have to go through the skull. Will you have to take a bit of his skull away and put it in that way? How does it work?
So what we do is we don't shave any hair.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a common concern for a lot of people.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Especially people with long hair.
Exactly. But also shaving hair increases the risk of infection. So it's not just that it's unnecessary. It can be harmful.
Yeah.
So we don't shave any hair. We wash the hair really well. We will give you some medicated shampoo to use anyway for 5 days before
I've
surgery.
got that. I picked
You've
it
got
up.
that already?
Yes.
Make sure you use it.
Yeah.
And on the day of surgery, we'll put you to sleep. First thing you come in, we'll put you to sleep.
Yeah.
And whilst you're asleep, we'll fix that frame to your head. And that's fixed with 4 screws that go in the bone. They don't pierce the bone, just sit in the bone. And we put local anesthesia, even though you're asleep. And that means that the frame is rigid and it's not going to move. And then put it in the MRI scanner and get that MRI scan that it's going to help us with planning how to enter and where to end up. All of that then goes in. So the scan goes in this neuronavigation system. The one we use is called Brain Lab. There are other ones. And that has a lot of algorithms in it. So this is where kind of a lot of AI comes in and a lot of algorithms. If it fails, it doesn't matter because I can still go to pen and paper and I can, on the MRI screen, I can draw lines, draw my coordinate system, the X, Y, and Z, and I can manually measure the coordinates. So it's nice to have it, but if all systems fail, we can still.
Don't worry. If there's a power cut, you're right.
Don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice to know there's a fallback.
Yeah. We then make 2 incisions behind the hairline. We make 2 holes in this skull. Put the DBS leads in.
Do you drill those?
Yeah.
I'm looking like Black and Decker drill, that sort of thing. What would you use?
So we actually.
Sorry, Kuhan.
DIY Dave.
So to start,
this is very surreal for me, by the way.
No.
to start these burr holes, we use a surgical instrument that I developed. It's called
of course you did.
It's called the Akram ore. Of course, you have to have your name on an instrument.
Yeah.
I mean, why else would you make one?
Is it patented?
It's not patented,
No.
so anyone can make it. I made it in my garage. This is why I love working at UCLH, because I took old instruments that were broken instruments, and then I modified them, and I made this new tool which breaks the skull just so that we can direct the burr hole. And
So just to clarify, the tool that's going to be used to drill into my brain, you made?
yes, yeah.
You started shaking big time.
Yeah, I know. But we have tested it before. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I'm in awe, as the name suggests. But sorry, continue.
Yeah. So I then took it back to the theatre manager, and she looked at them and said, "Well, we better get them a barcode and send them to get sterilized."
Wow.
And now I had to make more because we ran out of them.
Yeah.
So that's what we use to start the burr hole, and then we use something called a perforator, which will just follow the point where we started, and we'll drill a very precise hole in the skull. It has a clutch at the end of it, so it knows when you've got to the other side, so that it stops.
Right.
Which works.
And just help people visualize how you talked about sub-millimeter accuracy here. Just help people visualize where in the brain target areas are and how big they are and what's around it in terms of potential risks to other systems in the brain. Thinking about mood and so on. Yeah,
so very good question. So in Parkinson's disease, we have 3 targets mainly. So the 3 traditional targets. There's the subthalamic nucleus,
which is the most common
target. And it's a very, very small nucleus in kind of quite deep in the brain.
You've got to go right through the brain to get to it.
So it's quite deep in the brain. It's an almond shape, and it's it's 4x7
Dave and I are looking at each
millimeters.
other because we saw one yesterday.
We went to the brain bank at Imperial College and
okay.
dissected a brain in front of us and showed exactly where he's going, where you're going in.
Oh, brilliant.
The
Did you
point
take
is-
pictures?
We didn't actually. I was kind of somewhat blown away.
Did you see how small it is?
It's tiny,
It's tiny,
absolutely
yeah.
tiny. So
Yeah.
going back to what you said about you're doing all this manually with your hands, going that deep into the brain.
Yeah, but we're using the frame. So the frame has a guide, and you're measuring all the coordinates on the frame.
Right.
So it has something called an arc system. What it will do is we'll create this virtual sphere with the target in the center of this sphere. Yeah. So think about it that way. What will happen is, it doesn't matter where you start, you're always pointing to that center of the sphere, which is a very good way of targeting, because other system may align your trajectory. And if you try to align the trajectory, it's actually quite difficult. And also it means if there's an error at any stage, especially as it enters the brain, that error can get maximized at the target. Whereas if you're always pointing at the center, it actually doesn't matter where you're coming from, because you're going to end up at that center point, which is the principle. So, when I say we do it manually, it doesn't include, having a very steady hand, but it just means that I have to be very precise with putting my coordinates in the scales, in the vernier scales.
Maybe we won't go for that beer the night before.
A small glass of whiskey in the morning helps with the shakes.
For me or for you?
For both of us.
Well, if it helps with the shakes, then I don't need the DBS,
We'll
do
have a
I?
bottle, we'll have a bottle.
Can I just ask, because a lot of people won't be familiar with the target area SDN, that's going to help, by targeting that area for DBS, that's going to help with my slowness, stiffness, and tremor.
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's it, right?
Well, not quite. So, the subthalamic nucleus itself, even though it's tiny, it has lots of different circuits going through it. One of them is the motor circuit. Yeah. In fact, there are two motor circuits going through it. One motor circuit which is responsible for the slowness and the stiffness, and another motor circuit that's responsible for the tremor. For a patient with Parkinson's disease, it's very easy to get these two together. It was me who described those when I was doing my PhD. I mapped out these two networks in the brain and pinpointed what it's now called the sweet spot in the subthalamic nucleus, where we target. So it's very easy to place a DBS lead there. If we are 1 or 2 millimeters off of that, still in the subthalamic nucleus, but slightly deeper, then we start to affect what's called the limbic part of the SDN. Limbic means emotive, which if we stimulate that, or even if you just, by implantation, we might cause some swelling around the lead, you might be a little bit funny when you wake up. So you might feel paranoid, delusional. It might trigger impulse control disorder. So, just like with the drugs, you might, have hypersexuality or gambling or all of these stuff.
And all of that is due to the inflammation in the brain as part of the operation.
So that can happen because of the implantation effect.
Right.
Or it can happen if we're not slightly off, and we're stimulating in that part of the brain.
And how slightly off? What kind of?
We're talking millimeters.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So our targeting accuracy, audited targeting accuracy in Queen Square, where I work, is 0.9 millimeters with some standard deviation, but
0.9 millimeters.
Yeah. If we are more than 1.5 millimeters, we replace that lead there and then. So
how do you know if you've got it? How do you know after the fact how accurate you've been?
Very good question. And you'd be surprised how some surgeons, luckily not in this country, but in the States, don't actually ask that question. If you're an archer and
Bow and arrow watch.
Yeah. And you kind of
see the target.
You see the target. You hit the target. What do? You go to the target and check where you ended up, right? So what we do is once we put the lead in, we get another MRI scan
while I'm on the.
While you're still asleep.
While I'm still asleep.
We close.
Yeah.
So I would finish the operation, do everything together. I close, get another MRI scan, and I check. It doesn't have to be an MRI. We also get a CT scan because sometimes it's quicker. But we do all of that during the operation with your frame still on. Yeah. And then that will then tell us exactly where we are. And if I'm not happy, if I think, do you know what? That's not going to be optimal.
Take it out and do it again?
Yeah, I'll just take it
Drill
back.
another hole?
No, don't need to. It takes 15 minutes to take it back.
Right.
Take that lead off. Yeah. What I do is, so the reason why we don't end up in the right place is not because I put the measurements wrong.
Yeah.
It's because the brain moves.
Right.
So when
even though I'm screwed into this frame.
Yeah, but when you open it, it's just So when you put the lead in, it can sometimes deviate because it's going through soft, brain, and the brain might move, shift a little bit, and that can then. And sometimes, there's a system error. Maybe the calibration of the frame is slightly off.
I don't like that phrase, system error, to be honest with you.
Oh no, actually. That's a system error is something we like because we can correct for it, and we do.
Rather than getting nothing back.
Rather than the random error. Because if you're, going back to the archer analogy, if you're trying to hit a target and you always end up to the left because, there's wind or, there's whatever, you always end up slightly to the left, what do? You
adjust.
You aim slightly to the right of the target, and then you end up. And that's what we do. We keep getting these measurements after surgery, and then we keep auditing where we end up. And if we have a systemic error, then we adjust. We just say, okay, rather than aiming at the target, we want to hit the target. That's why I'm going to aim slightly 0.5 millimeters to the right of the target. And it's not just with every target. It depends on the angle of approach.
I'm wondering how you practice this, because it must have been the first time you did this on someone. I wouldn't want to be the first patient you try it out on.
How many of these have you done?
So we've done, in the department, 3,000 cases. And I suspect I've done maybe just shy of 1,000. I don't know. I don't know. So I haven't audited, but I've been
1,000 times.
Probably, yeah.
That's quite comforting.
That works in our PhotoFit brain surgery, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But not all of this is Parkinson's patients, right?
No, not all of it.
Can you just explain the other conditions where DBS is used?
So the established indications are mainly Parkinson's disease, but also a condition called dystonia, where you have an abnormal imbalance in muscle tones.
So this is where dystonia can exist as a condition in its own right.
Exactly, because you can obviously get dystonia with Parkinson's disease.
Don't we, Dave?
I get that on my right foot, yeah. Bends over, yeah.
So that's quite common in Parkinson's disease. But can you imagine if it's all over your body? Awful. It's awful, and it's and it can be fatal. So there's some genetic. It's almost always a genetic condition, except this is in something called primary dystonia. There are conditions where you get dystonia because your brain is deprived of oxygen during birth, so in cerebral palsy mostly. But it's almost always genetic, even if we don't pick up the right genes that cause it. And it responds well to DBS. Yeah.
What about things like Tourette's, OCD, depression? I hear DBS might be used for depression.
So we're at the moment we've just finished an IHR funded trial in Tourette's. Yeah. This will be our second randomized controlled trial in Tourette's. So we're leading the field in Tourette's. Again, an incredibly devastating condition, and I have a confession to make. But I have motor tics. I've always had motor tics from when I was a child, and and I can hide them well. But I found my daughter gets them now, my 7-year-old daughter, and and it's terrifying because I know that if it turns into full-blown Tourette's, it can be devastating. It's not, Tourette's is one of those conditions where, because it's so obvious and can be kind of funny, it's not considered seriously in the media, but it's an incredibly devastating condition. And when you see these patients improve and get their lives back, oh my goodness, it's just it's an amazing feeling. It's great, especially they're mostly young patients, and yeah. Well, I mean, I have to stop myself from crying, but I'm
nothing wrong with the
but
crying.
I cry. I'm terrible. I'm really bad. If patients start crying, I just start crying, and I don't think that's the kind of job. That's why I don't do anything. That's too emotional.
And just bringing this back to Parkinson's and just taking a step back, or maybe 2 steps back. Who is the ideal candidate for DBS? What kind of Parkinson's patient is the ideal candidate?
So DBS doesn't...
Feel free to use me as an example.
Yes. God, I mean, you're complicated.
Thanks.
We know that.
It's so the ideal candidate would be a patient who is still responsive to levodopa, which is tick, and who still has who's got good speech,
tick,
and good cognition,
tick, hopefully.
Debatable. No. We've tested you, so I can say, and whose main problem is motor fluctuations. So the fact that the medications are working, but they're not working as well as they work, and then you have on, and then you have off,
and then you have
on, and you have off, and that's very debilitating because you can't get on with your life. You can't go on holiday, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to work. And with any condition, the 2 things that can be detrimental: physical regression, and which means if you can't exercise, mobility is affected. That can really affect your well-being and your life in general. And social regression: if you lose your friends or your friendships, if you're not going out to meet other people, enjoy yourself, playing sports, then life becomes terrible.
One example I had recently: I just can't sit still in the dentist. So that's going to lead to other problems. It's those secondary impacts that it has. That's really a trigger for me anyway.
So just go back to the perfect candidate. Now, DBS will then, what DBS will do is it will get rid of the fluctuations. Right. So it won't make you better than what you're like at your best if the medications are working really well. But it will pick you up when the medications aren't working. So it means you don't have the fluctuations. You reduce in the subthalamic nucleus, you also reduce the medications, which means you don't get the side effects from the medications. And that could be mostly the dyskinesia. And if we go to the other target, which is a globus pallidus, we can get rid of the dyskinesias as well. Right. Which is why in your case, we decided to do that because...
That's quite rare, right?
It's quite rare.
How many of those have you done?
I think I've done about 4 or 5 of those. But it's, the surgery itself is easy peasy. There's nothing different to just doing 2 operations. Versus just having 2 for the price of 1.
So we should say actually that different centres do this different ways. And you talked about me being under general anaesthetic. That's not always the case. And multiple target areas, I presume, is also not offered at all centres. So this is very specific to me, but it's also very specific to the procedures at Queen's Square. So SDN will target primarily my slowness, stiffness and tremor, but could have other benefits as well, if I could put it like that. And the GPI target area will help with my dyskinesia, hopefully get rid of it.
Yes.
And also would help with my dystonia as well?
And it could help with the dystonia as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And what will it do for things like either positive or negatively? What will it do for my speech?
So the SDN is the one that could affect your speech.
Right.
And what it can do is you can, basically you might speak as though you've just had a big glass of wine.
Right.
And that can happen. It doesn't happen straight away. It could happen a year down the line.
And it could happen even if I didn't have DBS.
Precisely. So Parkinson's disease can affect your speech anyway. So it's one of those things that is really difficult to measure because it's a progressive disease. It's a moving target. And it could be that you are going to have problems with speech regardless. But DBS, we can sometimes adjust DBS to help with your speech. And actually, DBS can also help with the speech from the start. If you're someone who gets speech problems when you're off, it means that actually DBS will help with your speech.
Right, and I do. So my voice gets a lot quieter when I'm off. Also, my speech becomes a bit mumbled when I have dyskinesia.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping in my case anyway, at least initially, my speech will actually almost either stay the same or actually improve, particularly during my off and disconnected times.
I suspect that's the case. So with the thing that predicts, the best thing that can predict what will happen with your speech is your baseline. So your speech capacity now. And your baseline speech is perfect, which means it's if it's slightly affected, then it's not going to affect your speech intelligibility.
Good. I think that's good news for listeners of Parkies In A Pod, or not maybe.
I just wonder with wires and things like that, how do you put the wires in the batteries? Where are they going to go in Kuhan?
So the wires go all under the skin.
Can you see them when you?
You can't see them. No,
But
they're
you
very
can feel
thin wires.
them, right?
Do you know what? With the new wires, they're so elastic and tiny
Right.
that it would just feel like part of you. You can feel tendons in your neck.
Yeah.
You might feel them, I guess, but it will just feel like it's part of you. And the way we tunnel them under the skin is we use what's called in the profession the shish kebab technique.
I don't believe you.
No, we use something called a tumbler, which just goes under the skin in the fat layer, and it takes a lot of practice to get it right. But once you've done 1,000 or 2, it's easy peasy.
And the other end is connected to a battery.
The other end's connected to a battery, which are now quite small. So unlike the old batteries, and they're rechargeable, and that goes just in your chest, just under your clavicle. It should last 20 to 25 years, depending on use.
Yeah. I remember Matt Eagles, who's had Parkinson's for decades. He was one of the first people to have DBS. Battery technology has obviously come a long way because he describes his battery as it looks like he swallowed a mobile phone. Yeah. It was that big. It was protruding out of his chest.
And the design wasn't ergonomic. It was just a box, and it was horrible.
I've held one of the batteries that are going to be implanted in me.
Yeah.
The way I would describe the size is it's probably the size of a matchbox, but probably half as thin. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's tiny.
It is tiny. It's tiny. And it does so much. There's a computer that gets in there, and you should, you charge it over, just through the skin with, just like you charge your toothbrush, just by induction.
So same principle as charging your phone on a wireless charger.
On a wireless charger, exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And
you're worried about cuddling your wife with it, aren't you?
I am, yeah, actually. So a few practical questions here. So can I sleep on my front? Because that's normally how I sleep.
Yeah.
Can I cuddle with my partner, Helen?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
But let me put it another way. What can't I do post-DBS?
So the main one is arc welding. I don't know what you're like with arc welding.
Arc
You're going to
welding.
knock me up a shed, weren't you? That's gone.
Damn, do I have to give that up?
Roller coasters.
Roller coasters, yeah, that's fine.
You're going to roller coaster,
I would say, obviously, don't take up boxing or something like that. But it's
I can have my weekly game of tennis with Dave.
yes, yeah,
And,
absolutely.
We'll come to my motivations for DBS, but one of them is actually winning at tennis. So I'm holding you responsible for my tennis skills going forward.
Do you win at tennis now?
I do when, and this will be interesting actually for you, when I'm off, I go deliberately off when I play tennis.
Oh.
I either under-medicate or delay my medication.
Yeah.
Because what impacts my tennis
Is the dyskinesia?
is the dyskinesia. I can't
okay.
extend my arm away from my hand for a forehand or a backhand. I'm limping around the court.
Yeah.
My movement is not very free.
Yeah.
So I have a tremendous tremor when I do play tennis.
Yeah.
But of course, the type of tremor that typically happens in Parkinson's is a resting tremor. So if I'm got a racket in my hand, it doesn't show.
Yeah.
The only other symptom that I have to trade off is can't feel the racket securely in my hand.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is due to my Parkinson's. I don't know if DBS will help sensations or senses more generally.
I don't think it will help with the senses, but I think it will help with everything else. I think you stand a good chance, I think. But I don't know, it's not going to improve your skills. But,
No, I mean, my skills are there, but it's
Yeah.
just a bit masked by my symptoms. So
it will. But this is a very strange phenomenon in Parkinson's disease. There's something called paradoxical kinesis. Now, have you heard of this?
imagining symptoms?
No. This is when if you're completely off and you're completely frozen and you hear fire alarm goes off, you get up and run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard people never drown with Parkinson's. They get out of the pool.
And it's
So the mind can do
it's a
it.
different system altogether in the brain. So I guess, when you're playing tennis and there's a ball coming towards you, you can just go like that. But it should help with all the other symptoms. Sometimes, and that's what we can do is give you a program, a special program.
Tennis program.
A tennis program. So just as
Can you make sure that Dave doesn't have access to it? So just explain the principle of program and programming more generally, because the surgery itself is only almost the start of the journey.
That's true, and to be fair, it's a simplest part of the journey for us. That's why I like being the surgeon, not the neurologist, because they have to really do all the hard work afterwards and get the right program and follow up. Programming has come a long way since we started. It used to be very simple for electrodes, and there's simple programs. Now the possibilities are endless, and we're actually having to use imaging to guide our programming. So we can do the programming on the computer screen first, model it to see where we want the electricity to go, where we want it not to go, and then we can copy that onto your program. Or the newest system now can either detect the signal coming into the electrodes from the brain.
This is adaptive.
And then deliver electricity. Or it can use imaging, and we can just say, we want electricity to go there and there and there. And then it will give us a very complex program that we wouldn't normally come up with to maximize the effect and minimize the side effect.
So if I, for example, put it on the tennis setting when I'm starting a game with Dave, it would, at a simple level, for example, improve my movement even more and trade off something like speech?
Exactly. So, if we're in that situation, but it's possible that, you will get your best program will work for everything. But it might be that, we're getting a bit of dyskinesia, because DBS can also cause dyskinesia.
Yes.
Or it could be that it's affecting your speech, the best program affecting your speech or something like that. And we can always just do that. It just means that you have to stay quiet for the duration of the game.
Will you be able to control it on his mobile phone?
So I'm having the Medtronic system, if that
yes,
helps.
yeah. I think not just yet. I think
Right.
I think you are given your own. I'm not sure if the Medtronic system has an app, but I think you will get given your own controller.
Yeah,
which is
phone,
a phone,
or it looks like a phone.
Yes, which
Right.
is a phone. So that, but whether you can get the app on your phone or not, we'll have to
I
check.
don't think it's freely. It's not something you can download from the App Store. I don't think.
No, I
It's
don't think
all
so.
locked down.
Yeah.
It does just go to show how a lot of this is about technology and everyday technology, right? You're talking about wireless charging. I believe it communicates via Bluetooth as well.
Yeah.
Talking about a mobile phone, an app. I feel like the discussion about technology has outweighed the discussion about medicine and science and in this last hour or so. Just going back to the beginning, I guess that's what is in your interest, right? Because you were that kind of engineered child, and this must be very satisfying for you.
Yeah, for a technophile, it's brilliant. I get to, being a neurosurgeon is great because I get to play with power tools all the time. And then someone cleans up after me. It's just the dream
That's
job.
what you need, Dave.
Exactly.
I mean, neurosurgeons just play with computers and all those power tools. And we have all the technology. It's very exciting. Very exciting.
What's the reaction like when you tell people you're a brain surgeon?
Oh God!
I've got a brother-in-law who's a rocket scientist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very tricky when you're at a stand-up gig, and then someone says, "Hey, you're in the front. What do you do?" Because I remember once I said, "Well, I'm a neurosurgeon," and he said, "And I'm a jet pilot." I'm like, okay, good for you.
Can I just go back to DBS, because this is really informative, and a lot of people listening to this going to get very excited. I do sense in the community there's a lot of apprehension around something like DBS. It is brain surgery after all, and there are some risks. Can you just describe some of those risks for us?
Yeah, I mean, so neurosurgery in general is it's quite a risky field. And actually, most of the operations we do outside DBS, outside functional neurosurgery, carry a risk profile. But most of the times we're doing these operations to save lives or prevent disability, right?
Yeah.
So it's acceptable to have, I'm not saying we have huge risks, but, if there is a 1% mortality or stroke associated with an operation to remove a big brain tumor, we accept that, because what is the alternative? But when it comes to DBS and functional neurosurgery, it's not acceptable to have even a 1% mortality rate. That'd be very, very high, because you're not dying, right? I'm doing this operation on you to improve your function, to improve your quality of life. So it's unacceptable for me to make you worse. So
it's pretty unacceptable for me to die as well.
Yes, no, exactly.
Can you put a number to the 1,000 cases that you've done?
Yeah. So, and this is our results. We would estimate the worst thing that can happen with this operation is that you can have a brain hemorrhage as the wire goes into the brain. And that happens because it might hit a small blood vessel. The way we do the operation is we avoid anywhere in the brain that has a blood vessel that can cause a hemorrhage. And also we make sure your blood pressure is under control, you're not on any blood thinners. And that reduces the risk to a lot less than 1%. So much closer to zero. Yeah. There's no 0%, much closer to zero than 1%. We've had over 23 years, we probably had 2 or 3 hemorrhages, and none of them were symptomatic. Patients didn't get a stroke from them. Right. So they all, I think one had a slightly bigger hemorrhage because we then realized he had an undiagnosed blood clotting problem.
Some other complication.
Yeah, but he recovered, luckily. So the risk is very low. That's the worst thing that can happen. The other risks are you can get an infection. We managed to introduce the use of antibiotics inside the implants to reduce that risk of infection, and we've audited our results, and the risk is about 2%. And if that happens, it's because we are covered in bugs. We're covered in millions, billions of bacteria. And if one of those makes its way into the implant, your immune system can't get to it because there's no blood supply going into the implant. And that means if this bacteria starts to multiply and generate a biofilm, and then as your immunity goes down, it starts to produce an infection. Usually the solution is to remove the implant in order to treat the infection.
And that's the advantage of DBS compared to other surgical procedures. It's reversible, right?
Theoretically reversible, I would say.
So if something goes wrong, could you not take the kit out of my head?
You can, exactly. But what will happen is your brain will also get used to the stimulation, which means if all of a sudden it stops working, you're not on medications, because we reduce the medications by about 50%, sometimes more. So immediately after DBS, you will feel awful if we have to just take it out and switch it off. Which is why I say theoretically it takes a while for you to go back to your baseline afterwards. But yeah, it can be removed, it can be switched off. And in case of infection, what happens is we take it out, treat the infection, and then 6 months later we re-implant again. It can be quite disheartening, because especially if you're getting a really good effect from it and then you have to remove it. So it's quite upsetting for both patient and surgeon.
And what are the numbers on that?
Yeah, very low.
Very
so this
low.
is a 2%, 2-3% risk of infection.
I don't know. When people say 2-3%, when it's to do with your brain and your life, I don't know. What do you think, Dave? Does that sound like high? Or
I think that's good odds. If I was a betting man, I'd say, great.
It depends, what kind of man are you? If you're a 97% glass full man.
I tell you what kind of man I am. I'm at this stage where I need some relief. The off periods are terrible. The dyskinesia is terrible. And collectively, they are outweighing the total duration of my good on period in the day. So for most of the day, I'm in a bad state. This is one of the few times that you'll get me in a good state, actually. So that's where I am now, and that's why I'd be willing to play the odds. But it's not to be sniffed at, because these are very real risks.
No, true. And I tell you something, and this was, for me, a very, very hard lesson. I was still a resident. I think I was a resident or a fellow. I think I was a resident doing functional neurosurgery. And I remember going to consent a patient for a battery change. This is back in the day when we had to change the batteries every 4 or 5 years because they die and then we have to change them. And I remember the patient because I remembered being there for the operation, for the first operation. So I'm consenting the patient. And he was really scared of the surgery. And I said to him, I just don't understand. Why are you so worried? Because this is a minor operation. We're just changing the battery. And you had the big operation 4 years ago. That was the scary bit. And I don't remember you being that worried. You were excited. And he said something to me that made me reevaluate basically the way I look at risk during surgery. He said, look, when I had the surgery 4 years ago, I had nothing to lose, right? So it doesn't work. Now I have everything to lose if the surgery goes wrong, if I get an infection. And that's why I'm worried. And I felt very sheepish. And since then, I've never really assumed what is the thing that really matters to patients. It's not what I think should matter, because it's not me who's taking that risk, it's them. So it's not the complexity of the operation, it's not the complexity of the procedure, it's the effect on patients' lives if things don't go to plan. So that's why infection is one of those things that really we try to reduce as much as possible. This is why you have the medicated shampoo, and so all of these steps we've introduced over the years in order to bring that infection rate down. One of the other ways we bring it down is the fact that we're bloody damn quick and good at doing the operation.
How long will it take, by the way, since operation?
It takes an hour to do the whole the surgical time, but then
It's including the implant in the chest.
the implant in the chest and the 2 wires takes an hour to an hour and a half.
Wow.
But in your case, it's going to be slightly longer because we're doing 4.
Yeah.
But the everything else, so there's an hour before, an hour after, which is just putting you to sleep, getting the MRI scan, doing the planning, getting the scan afterwards, taking the frame off. All of that takes time. But the actual cutting time is not that long, and that reduces because the time your brain is exposed and the wires are exposed is short. That reduces the risk of infection.
Have you ever had a patient back out at the last minute?
No, but I've had patients whom we had to cancel the operation in the last minute because the disease had progressed.
I see.
Yeah, and that's very, very heartbreaking because you get patients come in and Parkinson's disease progresses in different ways in different patients and different speeds. And you see the patients in clinic and then you make a snap decision, right? You think, okay, you're good, your balance is good, you're not freezing that much, and your cognition is good, and then they come in to surgery, especially if there's a long waiting list, which is so we try our best to have that time between the clinic and surgery as short as possible, right?
I can tell you it's not that short.
Yeah,
unfortunately, I'm not.
I know.
It's not your fault. It's where we are, right?
We have to work with what we have, sadly, but we try to get. That's why we do 2 operations a day to get through that waiting list, because what we don't want is we don't want you to progress.
Yeah.
And that's part of that is, as I said, the physical regression, the social regression, where if we don't operate during that window of intervention, where we can give you that extra bit of movement so you can go and play tennis every day and make sure you maintain your physical well-being, and then we get you can deteriorate quickly, and then you end up in a situation where DBS can make things worse. Yeah.
It's important to understand that there is a window of opportunity, not just in terms of when you start to become the ideal candidate, but also when you stop becoming the ideal candidate, right?
Exactly.
And that's a few years.
Yeah.
But my advice to anybody, if your neurologist mentions DBS to you, don't be scared. Just start the journey to assess whether you're the ideal candidate or not. Just to put this in perspective, I've been on this journey for 2 years since I was first referred to DBS. My off test was a year ago.
Yeah.
And all of this is very rigorous testing. There's a very intense qualification process. I saw the neuropsychologist, the speech and language therapist, the neurologist, the nurse. I've spent more time with my multidisciplinary team over the last year or 2 than I have in the last decade before that. But if you are thinking about it, just get yourself on the journey. And I would say I went into this thinking I might not have it.
Yeah.
And as little as 6 months ago, I was still ruling it out. But the thing with Parkinson's, things progress, unfortunately, as you're quite rightly highlighting. So just in terms of where we are with the wait times, I would recommend anybody, if they're offered it, just to go on that journey, at least start the journey. I did also want to ask you, that multidisciplinary team, a few months ago, we had a meeting, including myself and my partner, Helen, where everybody gets together and we discuss me.
Yeah.
And what the right plan of action is. And I was telling this to Dave, and I said it with a bit of a chuckle. There's about 10 people in the room when me and Helen walked in. It can be quite intimidating, actually. Everybody's perfectly nice, I should say. Yeah. The team at Queen Square have been absolutely phenomenal. The neurologists, the neurosurgeons, the nurses, the DBS nurses, speech and language therapists, the neuropsychologists. Honestly, there's a lot of people involved, but it can be quite daunting for people that aren't used to that environment. And the one observation I had was me and Helen kind of sat on one side and everybody was in front of us, with the exception of you. And in my mind, I was thinking, is he looking at the back of my head and sizing out where he's going to go in from? I'm sure you weren't, but can you just explain how many incisions there will be? Because it's going to be more than one, isn't it?
Yeah, so there'll be 4 incisions.
Right.
2 incisions where we put the leads in, through which, and 1 incision behind just behind the ear, where we tunnel
Yeah.
the cables down to the chest, and an incision in the chest.
Right.
Yeah. Speaking of the MDT, I mean
Yes.
that's really that should be how life-changing decisions should be made with different specialties.
Sorry, I should add, I consider myself part of that team and that
you are,
decision-making process.
and the first thing we said to you was,
Yeah.
"This is not an interview. We're all on the
Yeah.
same side. We're all here to see what is best for you."
Sorry, I say that because some people think of this journey as a test, as a pass or fail thing.
Yeah.
I know somebody that's just had DBS now, and she was so nervous in the run-up.
Yeah.
Will they accept me?
Yeah. But
will I meet the criteria? It's not like that, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, what we want is for our patients to do really well, right? We don't want to make anyone worse, which is why we do this together, because I think I could say that for sure. None of us has that kind of ego that we think we know what's right for the patient. That I've just told you that story about me thinking I know what the patient should worry about and not, and that's ridiculous. So we want to all be there together because we don't want to make a decision that we'll then regret. I have to tell you, when I started doing when I joined the MDT, I've just become a consultant, and I had to lead it with the professors of neurology.
Is it intimidating for you as well?
Oh my goodness! I mean, it's the most intimidating thing I had to do, because neurologists are very, very good at taking history and examining patients, and surgeons, we're very quick. Most of the times our patients are asleep, so it's so I kind of lead the MDT, but I have an eye on Tom's and Patricia Limousin's facial expressions, because I can see if they think, yeah, okay, I'm doing all right. Because if I look and then Tom is kind of shaking his head, I think, ooh, okay, well, I better reevaluate what I
get the feeling sometimes it might be difficult for Tom to bite his tongue a little bit, right? But honestly, the team are fantastic, and I've got to say, I've had 2 appointments this week in the run-up as well. Without exception, everybody I've met has been very professional, very empathetic, very understanding. And it just fills you with confidence. You're going into a procedure like this, and for my partner as well. It's just very reassuring, and that's what you need. At least sort of the personality of patient that I am. I want to know everything, as you could probably tell.
Yeah.
But what must it be like for people that almost with blind faith, they just want some relief?
Yeah,
and they just give me something, do something.
So that's a very, very difficult situation, and it tends to be a cultural thing. So there are some, my culture included, my background, where there is this blind faith in doctors, and it makes, the responsibility is already very, very big on us, to have that as well, without, having a patient who's completely aware of what the risks are, makes it much harder. So we insist that patients need to really appreciate the risk, and that's why we tend to see patients with family members as well. That Parkinson's disease can sometimes cause impulsivity as well, which makes it harder to ensure that patients completely understand what they're getting themselves into. Luckily it's a low risk operation by standards of neurosurgery, and we don't make a decision on behalf of the patient, but when we reach a decision together, we will only do that if we are absolutely sure that the risk benefit ratio is favorable.
The reverence that you're talking about that some patients have for the medical community, in one aspect I find it quite healthy, in another I don't think it is. And I found this, being from the background I am, being of Asian origin, I find that's quite common actually. The example I always use is the post office scandal.
Mm.
Part of the reason the post office scandal didn't blow up sooner was a lot of the post office owners were people from the subcontinent, and they have a particular reverence for institutions like the NHS,
Yeah.
a particular reverence for professionals like yourself.
Mm.
What that means is sometimes you're not on an equal footing, and you don't have that balanced discussion,
Yeah.
and you don't always hear from the patient. My point is, in addition to being a plumber, an engineer, electrician, all that, you've got to be a good communicator with this. Yeah. Perhaps not so much in your role, but certainly the rest of the team, right?
Absolutely. But that's why our nurses are so invaluable. Amazing. Because they spend hours and hours with patients and talk to them. Patients come into the department and meet other patients, which is also a great resource. But we always say to them, look, perhaps you've met a patient who's done really well. It's not always like that. And I think what you guys are doing is incredible. I mean, that's patients will listen to this. They will get so much more than if they come in really nervous for a 45-minute appointment. Whereas this resource is fantastic for them to go back and then listen to it and get all the information.
Is there anything about DBS that you think we haven't mentioned that you would like to mention?
DBS is a lifelong commitment. And you have to think about Parkinson's as it's a moving target. This is going to work for, the rest of your life.
Yeah.
There will be other things that might happen, right, with Parkinson's.
Other treatments, you mean?
There could be other treatment, but also other features, other kind of pathologies that will develop with Parkinson's. Dementia, for example, freezing of gait, speech problems, memory problems. And DBS it's not the panacea, but it's a really good tool to control the stiffness, the slowness, and the tremor. But it requires care, requires lifelong commitment. There is a device burden that comes with DBS.
Charging, the programming.
Charging, the restrictions.
Just explain some of those restrictions.
So having an MRI scan, for example.
I won't be able to have an MRI again.
In your case, you can't have an MRI scan because you have two devices. But in most patients who will have one device, they can have an MRI scan, but we need to put the device itself in something called MRI mode and ensure that the sequences, the energy that we deposit in the patient is not too high that can affect the device. So there are some restrictions, but you know what? If you start a new medication, that can have side effects.
Well, exactly. I mean, I'm already taking drugs that are doing some good, but doing some bad as well. So I'm already sort of messing with the mind almost. And one particular quirk of my Parkinson's journey is that I've developed, part of that sort of compulsive behaviour, I've developed compulsion for photography. And I've also developed a creative streak linked to that as well. I've taken 200,000 photos since I was diagnosed on my phone. So
very good ones as well.
Yeah, thanks. You've got one printed upstairs, haven't you? For me, that's to do with the creativity side of Parkinson's that could be triggered, and it comes out in different ways in different people. But it's also the compulsive side of it as well. We've talked a little bit about the risk of the compulsive side. But what will happen to my creativity going forward? Because one of the positives of Parkinson's, if I can put it like that, one of the few positives has been I've developed this creative streak. Will that go away? Will it be heightened or reduced? Or
so it's very difficult to tell for sure. But a lot of that is because of the doses of dopamine that you're taking, right? And it is quite possible that might get dampened down a bit with DBS.
Right.
Well, we won't be able to tell, until you've had it done and reduce the medications. What might happen is that because you're a lot more confident with venturing outside, and you might end up using, your photography even more. Because you've developed this habit. But creativity is linked to the medications sometimes, and reducing it.
I showed Dave a graph I did a while back, which showed my journey over a decade plus, the number of photos I've taken every month, and where I've had a medication change. which normally means increasing medication, you can see an uplift in the number of photos I've taken.
Fascinating.
So there's a direct correlation. And it's one thing of all the symptoms or quirks of Parkinson's that I would like to retain. It's that one. But we'll have to wait and see. If it gives me back my life, then I guess that's an acceptable trade-off for me.
No, I remember a patient who also had this kind of increased creativity, started writing poetry, and that wasn't enough. She started painting her house and kind of painting all the walls in paintings, and then she ran out of walls. So she then bought a castle in Scotland and started painting the walls inside. So I guess photography is probably much more manageable.
Yes, yeah. Can I just lastly ask a few little quirky questions, if I may? I heard you on another podcast recently. The name of that podcast was We Can Be Weirdos.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Which is a great name for a podcast. It's actually a great podcast.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a weirdo, and is it a prerequisite for your profession?
Yes, I mean, sadly, I do consider myself a weirdo, but I don't think it's a prerequisite. I guess it just depends on what you do and what you're interested in. I've always been a geek, I guess.
Yeah.
But I my son asked me yesterday. So I gave a lecture yesterday at the Royal Society of Medicine, and I got back home, and both my kids, who are 7 and 8, I've got
you gave a lecture at the Royal Society of Medicine?
Yes.
That's a big deal, right?
Well, yes, I was very privileged really to be excited. But I came back, and my wife said, "How did the lecture go?" And I said, "Well, I think it went really well." And my daughter said, "Oh, Daddy, you gave a lecture. It went well. Are you famous, Daddy?" And I said, "Yeah, maybe." And then she said, "Are you a celebrity?" And I said, "Only amongst geeks." and then my son said, "What is a geek?" I think it's bedtime now.
That's a difficult one to explain to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Just talking of interests, I think you've got a hobby that you share with Dave. You both brew your own beer.
You brew your own beer?
I've got my own hops. I've got hops growing, mini variety. A garden variety of hops. We do a green hop brew every year, so with a local brewery.
That's incredible. And are you making anything at the moment?
No, we wait till autumn till the hops come out, and then take them to a brewery and do it all together. Yeah. So.
Well, you bring them to mine, and then we'll make something. We'll make some English ale.
Perfect. Yeah.
Excellent. Dave, can I just ask you, having heard this, because you haven't had DBS and you're not on that journey.
No, not yet.
How listening to all this, how would you feel in the future having DBS?
I feel 100% confident. 100% confident. Yeah. It's really put my mind at rest, because I used to worry about it and think, will I go for it? If I'm in that position where I need to go for it, I go for it now. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And it's thanks to the likes of Harith that gives you that confidence, right?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to close by saying, we've had 45 episodes now, right, Dave? Over 100 guests. And we never ask anything of them in terms of anything other than their time. And you've been very generous with your time today. I will ask you something, because it's obviously very personal to me, and I'm sure my partner Helen would echo this. If you can, just some relief. That's all I'm after. Going back to what you said before, if I can live a normal life and regain some independence and gain some confidence, and I can make Helen breakfast or take her out for dinner and things that I've been able to do for years. Yeah. That's all I ask. If you can make that possible, that's a huge win for me, and I'll be eternally grateful.
Yeah. No, I tell you what, we'll do everything we can. But based on your presentation and all the tests we've done, I'm pretty confident that we can achieve that. And I wish I could. I wish my grandmother had the same opportunity. But we've come a long way since then, and now we can say with confidence that look, we can make it better.
Amazing.
I think you've given us a wonderful picture of DBS. I think you've allayed a lot of fears, I would imagine, amongst our listeners, because that's what Dave and I come across a lot in the community. There are myths out there about DBS, and I think you've helped dispel them. Very honoured to be a patient of yours. Oh. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
What a guy. What an amazing story as well.
I think we've all got a little crush on him, haven't we? Well, what a guy, what a story. This sounds silly, but he's one of these people that looks at you straight in the eye when he's talking to you, which is a rare art these days, right? People don't look at each other in their eyes. But it felt like a real personal conversation, and he reminds me a little bit in certain ways of my dad. Just the background, and I don't know, there's a certain amount of serendipity with his story, and a certain amount of fate with me and him, I guess, because we've been brought together. He's a neighbour of ours as well, which is a bit random, isn't it?
It was really weird because we were playing tennis the other day, and suddenly he walks past with his dog, who's called Bruce, actually, after Bruce Springsteen, which is even more ridiculous.
Yeah, when you heard that was the cherry on top for you, right?
Exactly, yeah. I love him more now.
Yeah. It was also a bit weird because he had a producer following him round and filming us while we were actually doing the podcast. So they're making a documentary about him, which doesn't really surprise me because he's got a fascinating story. He's a great guy. Also, the story about his family, his grandmother, his aunt, his daughter. I felt like we met the whole family, and I thought it was quite touching when he said at the end he wished for his grandmother who had young onset Parkinson's. He wished that this procedure was around at her time, which I thought was quite poignant. I mean, that backstory about his childhood, growing up and playing with bombs and going to medical school at the age of 16, fleeing Saddam Hussein's regime, going across the border with fake papers. You know, you couldn't make it up, could you?
Absolutely incredible. How do you feel about deep brain stimulation after chatting to him?
Well, I feel reassured, actually. I feel very reassured. Like many conversations I have with that team, he just sort of gives off confidence, and I'm just reinforced in the view that it's the right treatment for me at the right time, and I feel in good hands. I'm nervous about the procedure itself, obviously. He talks about less than a 1% risk of stroke, 2-3% chance of infection, some cases leading to reversal of the procedure, i.e. taking it out. I'm not looking forward to the ward experience. I'm not looking forward to the hospital, full stop, but it's the right time for me, and him and the team have given me a lot of confidence and a lot of information and a lot of time as well.
You say it's the right time. It definitely is. I've seen a bit of a decline in you recently. You're a bit more dyskinetic.
I am.
And you know, I'm seeing you when you can hardly walk, and so if you came to the door the other day, you couldn't walk through the door.
I couldn't.
I had to sort of you had to grab my shoulders to get through the door.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's time for you, isn't it?
It's time. I mean, it's depressing when I'm like that, but it's also reassuring knowing that's the trigger, right? That's the right time, because I think the worst thing is if you're not sure, and if they're not sure. But it's stuff like that. My daily life is impacted to the extent my bad time outweighs my good time in the day. So, yeah. For
those who can't see you now, you're moving quite a lot, and you can probably hear the chair moving as well because it's dyskinesia.
It is, and it's terrible, and it's tiring. You know, I've got the whole day of this, you know, and it's like a constant workout. So I'm looking forward to a bit of a relief.
Yeah, we're not going to do amazing things this time, because I think you're amazing, Kuhan, for being so open and honest about your deep brain stimulation. You're going to inspire a lot of people to at least contemplate it, if not get it done. And Harith was great as well, just chatting so openly and honestly about it. And you've both been fantastic. So I wish you well in your surgery.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's strange.
I'll be there when you wake up, holding your hands.
Yeah, it's going to be strange. I don't know what the feeling is going to be like when I wake up, but I feel well supported. Not only by the NHS team, but also by friends and family, which is really important. And I realise I'm very lucky. I realise also not everybody's in this position. So hopefully there'll be a good outcome for me at the end.
I'm sure there will. With people like Harith around and his team, you know, you're in the best possible hands.
Amazing. And once again, you know, NHS, right? The fact that we can get all this on the NHS. It's been a long way, you know, it's been a 2-year journey for me to get to this point, and there's going to be lots of steps afterwards, as you heard from Harith, about the programming and the fine-tuning afterwards. But I've got to this point, and people have been amazing.
Have you even thought about the moment when they turn it on?
Well, I don't want to hope too much, to be honest with you, Dave.
You want to get it done before you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quietly hopeful, if I can put it like that. It's not a cure, don't get me wrong, but for my slowness, stiffness and tremor, I think it would be quite effective. Don't forget what Tom said when he was on one of our earlier episodes.
This is Tom Fultoney.
Professor Tom Fultoney, who's now my neurologist, and he's one of the DBS neurologists. He said, what DBS does for you is the equivalent of what the meds do for you now when you're on, but keep you at that state all the time. So it'll effectively remove your offs. You won't stop progression, but you'll be maintained at your as good as your on period is now. So in a way, I'm kind of looking forward to feeling a bit lighter, feeling like the weight of stiffness and rigidity and the movement, the tremors, the dyskinesia. I liken it to a lightening of a load on me. I hope anyway that it will just make me just a little bit freer, a little bit more independent, also a little bit more able to give back to the likes of my partner Helen and to the wonderful community, and just set me free a little bit. Let me put it like that.
Fingers crossed it does exactly that, Kuhan, because we laugh and joke on here, and we have fun, and we chat a lot about positive things. We're very positive people, but occasionally it does get you down. And sometimes I see you. Sometimes I look in the mirror and look at myself. I think the face is looking miserable and stuff. I think, what's going on? That happy bloke that was there 10 years ago, he's not there anymore. But we're still positive. We're still enjoying life. Yeah. But it can be really tough.
It can. It's a grind, and it gets tougher and tougher. I know we get a lot of newly diagnosed listening to this podcast. It does get tougher, but as you said the other day, actually the condition progresses, but also our way of managing it improves as well. You have to work at it.
I've been watching a few of your videos recently, very good, and I found one the other day, and it had a little message of hope. We're just going to finish with that. If that's all right with you?
Yeah, sure.
Cheers. This is Kuhan on Hope.
All right. See you on the other side.
See you. Bye. Good luck, Kuhan.
Thanks. Well, hope is a recurring theme for me. There's a pub near me that's actually called The Hope. Every time I go past it, I end up taking a photo of it. It's an impressive building. It's also where I had my second date with my partner, and where I told her I had Parkinson's. Unfortunately, she didn't run away, and we often go back there now. So hope as a place, as a word, as a feeling, has a special meaning to me. And hope is a recurring theme in the Parkinson's community too. And normally it's in the context of a cure. And of course we all hope for that. But hope can be a double-edged sword. I see others with the condition and their loved ones holding out for hope to the extent that they put their lives on hold in a way that's not always healthy. They're waiting for the answer, that magic pill or treatment that will make it all go away, and as a result they don't live their lives in the present, and I think that's a shame. And I don't want to take away anything from those remarkable people in this field who are trying to find ways to slow, to stop, and ultimately reverse or prevent the condition in the first place. It's really very humbling to know that there are people out there who dedicate their lives to the cause. But ever since I was diagnosed, I've been told that a cure or a real breakthrough is just around the corner. Well, it must be a pretty big corner, as it's been almost a decade, and the only thing that's progressed is my condition. But then so is my outlook on life. And don't get me wrong, we all need hope, but it needs to be balanced, and we need to be realistic as well. It may not happen in my lifetime, and we should acknowledge that. And at the same time focus on living well with the condition. I think the entire community has been buoyed seeing what's happened with the coronavirus, and how with the right focus, the right funding and the collective will, a cure, a vaccine in that case, was developed in a relatively short period of time. So why can't we do that for Parkinson's? And it does need more attention and more funding, a lot more. But in reality, we know far more about respiratory conditions like COVID than we know about neurological conditions like Parkinson's.
I always think it's amazing how much we know about the brain, but it's also staggering how much we don't know. I don't want to say it's a needle in a haystack, but as well as that focus and investment in research, we're going to need some luck and some patience. There was a famous neurologist who once said something along the lines of, in his lifetime, he could foresee some treatment that could stop the progression of the disease. That was James Parkinson, who said that, and he said that over 200 years ago. One of the ironies of living with a condition that quite literally makes you slower is that when you do slow down, you start to see things more clearly. Yes, I hope and pray for a cure, but above all, when I think about my future and the future of millions of others affected by this condition, the thing I hope for the most is that, cure or no cure, that we can live a happy, rewarding life, cherishing each day, not like it's our worst, but like it's our best.